Thanks for staying with us here on Richo. In the studio, I'm joined by Senator, I can now call you that, Senator Sam Dastyari.
Great to be here, Graham.
New South Wales Labor. Now, I'm a very strange fella, and I'm one of those crazy people who sit there and watch Parliament on occasions.
Says a lot about you.
And it does nothing good. But I asked you on because I saw you when you were in the debate on the financial advisors and all that, all the stuff on the future of financial advice. And you referred to what the government was doing in backing down on some of Labor's reforms as handing it all back to the con men, the crooks and the criminals. Yep. Which was a pretty big phrase. What do you mean by that?
Look, the financial services sector has been ridden by scandal. Ridden by scandal. You got Timber Corp, you got Storm, you got Commonwealth Financial Planning, you got Trio. There's scandal after scandal. And what you have is a handful of really dodgy financial advisors that have given the industry as a whole a terrible, terrible name. And what the government's done by watering down some of these reforms, and I'm happy to go through them with you, is hand over the sector back to these group of individuals, give them their wish list, and what's going to happen is, the crooks, criminals and con men who have taken advantage of people repeatedly are going to get a blank cheque. And that's the really worrying thing about these reforms.
Well, what's the single worst thing in the reforms that did that? How did the government actually do it? What? Give us one example.
Okay, one example. Well, there's really two big ways. Firstly, it all comes down to who's paying for your advice. What are you getting for the advice you're paying for? So it comes down to the fact that if I'm your financial advisor and I'm sitting down with you, am I getting paid by the person whose products I'm selling, or am I getting paid by you to give you financial advice? It's all conflicted remuneration. What was happening...
Often both.
Well, often
Isn't that
both.
Right?
And the big problem in places like Timber Corp and that was that these people, these financial consultants, advisors, were getting kickbacks from the people who were selling them the products. They were selling products that they knew were bad products, and they knew you were going to lose money on them, but they didn't care because they were making their money. So by turning around and allowing sales bonuses back in, right? So they turn around, the government says, oh, we've banned conflicted remuneration, but you can have a sales bonus. Well, a sales bonus is conflicted remuneration by another name. When you turn around and say that no longer do you have to have a best interest duty, so no longer is the test for myself as a financial planner to say whether or not I'm taking your best interest at heart. Right? These are bad changes. These are watering down reforms. And frankly, what you have here is a sector and a financial services sector that's got the government by the throat. They're their biggest donors now. They've gone around, they've collected the cash, they've done the fundraising, and they've come back now with a series of reforms that are wish lists for the industry. And look how hard the government fought. I mean, Graham, the debate comes down to a really simple thing. You have to ask yourself, who needs the protection? Is it the ordinary mum and dad investors who need protection, or is it the financial services industry and the advice?
But Sam, we didn't have it anyway. I look back on Storm Financial, and I think that's something like 5 years ago. It's a long time. I've railed about it often on this show. No one's gone to jail. No one's been charged. The bloke who ran it, sitting up there in a great big house in Brisbane, he couldn't give a rat's. He's totally free. I mean, as I said a couple of weeks ago, he couldn't track an elephant through snow. So they got away with it anyway, didn't they?
Well, yes. And what's happened is, what ASIC... Let's talk about ASIC as an org. ASIC is a terrible, terrible organisation in terms of how ineffective it's been on some of these big issues. And there's a lot of us who've been arguing for a long time that there has to be some major reform at ASIC. We've recently done an inquiry into it. I don't think it's been helped by the fact that the government's, chopped another $100 million out of the ASIC budget. I don't think that helps. But the problem with ASIC is this. ASIC has to ask itself, is ASIC meant to be the cop on the beat? Is that going to be their role? Or is their role going to be the protection of the financial market stability? And the problem with ASIC is it's trying to do too many things for too many people at the same time. And I think that ASIC needs to be given a narrower charter and has to be given either, you're going to say that ASIC's job is to start coming after these people, the way the New Zealanders do it really well with their Serious Fraud Office, and so do the British, or you're going to give that role to someone else. But the fact is, these people should be going to jail.
And Australia has an appalling record of sending them there, doesn't it?
Yeah, look, take Timber Corp. Right? There's a guy called Peter Holt that was doing all the who lives down in Melbourne, right? He still lives in his $3.5 million place. He's still driving around in cars. He, quote-unquote, bulletproofed himself through his lawyers to make sure that none of his assets could get taken. And there's 300 or so people that are now losing their homes, losing their savings, losing their investments. And frankly, it's not just the financial, and we talk a lot about the CommBank. You know, ANZ, NAB, the other banks have a lot to answer for allowing these practices to go on.
And that's where I slightly disagree with what you were saying earlier on. Is it not true? You're talking about the donations being collected. The most pressure on the government for this was from the Big Four, wasn't it? They haven't been putting money into the Liberal Party, have they?
Oh, yes, they have.
Have they really?
Yeah, the Big Four have.
Enlighten me.
Well, look, I mean, we're not going to see the full donation, and the government won't come clean with what they have and haven't accepted. So let's be clear. In the Labor Party, we have a simple rule. Anything over $1,000, we will declare. They're not declaring anything below the threshold, which is about $11,500. And they use the loophole, which is I can get 10 checks on 10 different days for just under the threshold
for 11,000 or something,
and not have to declare it. Yeah. And yeah, the big banks, yes, I mean, you know, the financial services industry, you know, they've got John Brogden out there. They have been raising money from this industry throughout the last year and a half. And, you know, I get the invites, we get the information, and a lot of it's going to come clear when the records come clear. I've called on the government to actually come out and give us a frank and honest assessment of how much money was donated to them from the financial service industry, including the Big Four, and they won't.
Yeah, I'll bet they won't. Now, speaking of the Big Four, the Commonwealth Bank itself has been in all sorts of strife over recent times. Now, it seems to me that their troubles don't go back 5 minutes, they go back quite some time. But I watched Ian Narev when he had his press conference. I actually sat down and watched that press conference. Yeah. To me, he sounded sincere. He struck the right notes. Is he doing enough to sort out the terrible problems? Because there are so many people who got dudded by the Commonwealth Bank, who were given very poor products by people, as you say, getting bonuses for so doing.
Yeah, look, I mean, firstly, I think on Narev, give the guy the benefit of the doubt. He did take over after a lot of these things had happened. I think the steps that he's taken have largely been the right steps, and I think, you know, you've got to congratulate people for doing the right thing. But let's be clear, this isn't a company being a good corporate citizen. This is a bank with record profits that were dragged kicking and screaming to the table to give people money back that they had stolen. So let's be clear about this. This isn't some initiative of the Commonwealth Bank to show them how good they are and what great corporate citizens they are. They were dragged kicking and screaming. They lied, they withheld information, they conned people, they had a systemic internal culture within the Commonwealth Bank of rorting money out of innocent, poor investors. And so now they've turned around and said, oh, look, you know, the people we stole from, we're actually going to do an investigation and try and give some of them back. Here's the problem. A lot of people out there don't know they got ripped off. A lot of people out there don't know they got conned. At the end of the day, this whole episode, the way it's heading at the moment, will have been a really profitable move for the Commonwealth Bank, because at the end of the day, not everyone's getting their money back, because not everyone knows their money got stolen.
So not everyone gets their money back?
Well, they're not going to be able to pursue it. They're not going to know to pursue it.
Because the Commonwealth Bank had a role in Storm as well, didn't it?
Yeah. Look, the Commonwealth Bank's culture and behaviour, I mean, look, you don't want to single out just the Commonwealth Bank, but you know, I think it's come across the entire sector. But you look at the Commonwealth Bank, and the Commonwealth Bank itself, this is the interesting thing of what Narev said in his press conference. He says the problems go back to 2003. 2003. This is when the problems go back to. You know who was the CEO of the Commonwealth Bank in 2003? Who was actually running the show?
I'm guessing David Murray.
David Murray, right? The guy who's now doing the government's own investigation into the financial services industry. The CEO of the Commonwealth Bank himself has come out and said, hey, by the way, the guy that's running the inquiry by the government, the financial service industry, you know, is when these problems actually began in our bank. Now, look, we'll get to the bottom of it. We don't know what's happening. The Labor Party has a very, very clear position. We've said there's been a call by the Senate Economics Committee, which I now chair, to have a Royal Commission into the Commonwealth Bank and the industry as a whole. Bill Shorten and Chris Bowen have said that, well, these are matters for government. We can't call for a Royal Commission. We've written to...
But do you think we should have one?
Well, yeah, we believe that the best way to get to the bottom of this is some kind of a judicial process, but the government has to come forward with that. Chris Bowen's written to Matthias Cormann and made it clear to the Acting Assistant Treasurer, Finance Minister, you know, the guy actually is running the government.
Now, I've heard more from you bagging the banks than I've heard from any Treasurer we've had in the last 7 years from the Labor Party. Now, I kept saying to them, why don't you do something about credit card interest rates? Why don't you at least get up and start to try and have a crack at the banks over it? Now, a week ago, the Commonwealth Bank sent out a whole range of letters putting up their credit card interest rates by more than 1%. Then today they announced they're going to drop their mortgage rates. But they're paying for it by the credit card rates. So why don't the Labor Party, I asked them to do something about it, why don't you get up and say there's something got to be done about that?
Well, look, you know what the problem with credit card interest rates is, right? At the moment is they're just gorging a lot of people. And this is the problem you've got, right? there doesn't seem to be the relationship that there once used to be with the cash rate and credit card interest rates.
No, there's none.
And it doesn't match the risk profile. So if this was an insurance company, right? So insurance companies, there's risk profiles, you do a risk assessment, you know, if there's floods and this and that, and the risk goes up, the price goes up. The problem with the credit card interest, there's a lot of people out there in Australia and Middle Australia who, there's two interest rates that matter. There's the home loan interest rate and the credit card interest rate. And these are people who are living month to month, paying off the absolute minimum on their credit cards. And when you're looking at credit card interest rates that are kind of, you know, in the low, early 20s, you have to ask yourself, is there that much risk? Does this actually match a risk profile?
Well, I'm going to feel a lot better when you get, if you can get the Shadow Treasurer to come out and say that, because I have tried. So if you're listening, Bowen, I have said to you, you've got to have a crack at this. We've at least heard something from Dastiari. I hope you can do something. Sam, I want to thank you for your time.
Thank you.
But I do have to leave it there. I'll be back in just a moment with Keith Suter. We're going to talk about MH17, we're going to talk about Iraq, and we're going to talk about Gaza.